Agent 007 has transformed from visionary novelist Ian Fleming's idea of a British spy during the Cold War into an American icon. From the first installment of the franchise as it hit the US markets in the mid 20th century as a television show pilot for an adaptation to Casino Royale with its intrepid agent Jimmy Bond, to become a franchise that is essentially propping up MGM Studios well past their expiration date. James Bond has become a household name, essentially. The franchise grows in the US with each new installation. Many actors have portrayed the iconic, smooth talking Bond, most recent of which is Daniel Craig in Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, Skyfall, and most recently, Spectre. Daniel Craig's role as Bond was received as a dubious move when first announced, but his performance as Bond has brought many back to the Sean Connery glory days of the franchise. As of late, the Bond franchise has experienced a bit of an inner dichotomy. On the one side, the producers want to stay true to the original Bond, where Sean Connery was playing the slick, suave Bond, while the scenes and the characters and the plots of the films were rather silly, but not as silly as the Pierce Brosnan Bond films. And on the other side of this conflict, the producers want to appeal to a new audience, one that values depth in the characters and the plot of their films. And when making Spectre, I think the producers just said, to hell with it. They created a film with extreme depth in characters and plot, and they put some silliness in there every once in a while. The producers tried something new, and I think it worked out great. Spectre's plot plays off of the most recent Bond films with Daniel Craig. MI6 is becoming obsolete. The 00 program is dissolving along with it, no thanks to Bond's unsanctioned disasters in Mexico and Italy. And MI5 is dissolving, or absorbing, MI6, and is replacing the 00 program with a sophisticated surveillance program that utilizes drones to do Bond's work. On his unsanctioned escapades, Bond discovers this secret, ghost-like organization, aptly named Spectre, behind which has been linked to the antagonists of the previous films. Spectre opens up straight into the plot. Mexico, Day of the Dead. We see Bond walking amongst the oceans of people in the festive streets of the city. And at a glance, this looks like just another Bond film. But I'll tell you what, this is not just another Bond film. It's the most generally appealing film catered to today's audience and the Bond purists. Spectre is a throwback to the old Bond. It has iconic villains like Hinx, the Jaws odd job Cross, who is ominously silent and kills people with his silver thumbnails. And from Hinx's fight scene with Bond, the audience is oddly reminded of the massive Frenchman from the 2009 Sherlock Holmes film. The fight scene between the two also brings back a lot of the silliness from the original films, where Hinx is attached to these large cans that are being thrown from the train. And right before he's ejected from the compartment, he looks into the camera and says, "Oh shit." Another villain that's iconic and memorable, not because of his throwback to the past, but more of his similarity to other memorable villains. Andrew Scott's portrayal of C is brilliant. He's commonly casted into these deceitful villain roles because he just naturally seems to have mastered the art of doing so. As example in his portrayal as Moriarty in the TV series Sherlock. Now, don't get me wrong. Spectre has its moments, but nothing compares to the original Sean Connery Bond films. Sean Connery was able to give us the perfect balance between the suave bravado of Bond and the distant coldness that he had to have to do his job. Daniel Craig leans more towards the cold Bond and is unable to completely grasp what is needed to have that bravado to portray Bond, as we have expected from the Bond standard set by Sean Connery. Another stark contrast between Spectre and the earlier Bond films is that the enemies aren't affiliated with a specific state, a specific nation. So we're mostly dealing with terrorists or lunatics. So this inherently changes the feel of the films. Because after the Soviet Union collapsed, it became very difficult to keep communism as the enemy. So the producers moved more towards an individualistic and radical enemy. Spectre is inherently separate from the original Sean Connery Bond films, as are all Bonds post-Connery era. Spectre's come very close to satisfying the die-hard Connery fans and still appeals to the modern film connoisseurs of today who would rip apart the superficial films that were part of the original Bonds.